This is the Atari XE Game System. It's a computer. Or is it a game console? Or is it a computer? Or is it a game console? Or is it a computer? Or is it a game console? Or is it a computer? Hello and welcome to Video Game Retrospective. Today we're taking a look at this, I'm not sure if I should call it gorgeous or ugly, Atari XE Game System. Let's get into it. So it's not really possible to discuss the story of the XEGS without first discussing this man, Jack Trammell. Although his name is not quite as well known as that of Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, it probably should be. Jack was many things: a Holocaust survivor, a military man, and founder of the company that would create the best-selling computer of all time, the Commodore 64. Jack founded Commodore in the Bronx in 1953 as a typewriter repair company. Through the years, Jack would build his business from repairing typewriters to selling mechanical adding machines, which would lead him to his first $1 million expansion, selling electronic calculators through the 60s and 70s. Jack was a pragmatic man, not afraid to go to Japan to learn the tricks of the trade or work with outside companies like Commodore's long-standing relationship with Texas Instruments or MOS Technologies, a chip manufacturer that Commodore would end up purchasing outright. Under Jack's leadership, Commodore would then move to computers when the calculator market began to cool down. They would find great success with the Commodore PET, the VIC-20, and then the Commodore 64. Jack Trammell had shared control of Commodore with Canadian businessman and investor Irving Gould since 1966. To say that the men did not get along well would be an understatement. Jack's management style was frequently the cause of friction between the two. Jack was headstrong and stubborn, as well as being infamous for his micromanaging. All work stopped when Jack was out of the office by his own order. Jack also had a tendency to want to fill every possible niche in a market. Sometimes that would lead to massive success, like the computer line, but at several different points it would lead Commodore to near bankruptcy, causing Irving Gould to have to inject millions of dollars to save the company. A heated company board meeting on January 13, 1984, would end with Jack storming out of the room and never returning to Commodore. It's worth noting that we still don't know exactly what caused the argument that led to the breakup. Everyone who attended the meeting has shared a completely different version of the story. Jack was now out of a job, but flush with cash thanks to a solid golden parachute, and would then use that money to purchase the consumer division of Atari from Warner Communication. Atari had been bleeding money since the North American video game crash in 1983, and Warner was happy to cut them loose. With this, a new era started at Atari. Goal number 1 was to turn the company's finances around and start making a profit. The most well-known way this was done was with the release of the new next-gen home computer in the Atari ST. Atari would then take their aging 600XL and 800XL computers and update them with some quality-of-life changes and snazzy new cases based on the Atari ST. These were the Atari 65E and the 130E. Okay, now we can finally talk about the Atari XE Game System. Jack and his team wanted a new game console to compete with the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Sega Master System. What they did was take the 65E computer and put it into a new, let's say, interesting case to sell as a video game console. That's right, internally the XEGS is exactly the same as the low-end computer Atari was selling at the same time. The way Atari hoped to distinguish it from their computer line was with a sweeping marketing campaign targeted at kids, and by selling the system in 2 different packages. There was the basic package, which contained only the console itself and a CX40 joystick, the same joystick included with the Atari 2600 since its release in 1977, but this time It's gray. Then you have the Deluxe set, which came with the previously mentioned console and joystick, as well as the keyboard, the game Bug Hunt, and the XG1 light gun. The package would essentially make your setup a full computer, with the notable exception of not coming with a floppy disk drive. Atari never sold a disk drive specifically for the XEGS, but it remains fully compatible with other 8-bit line disk drives. One of the strangest things about Atari's strategy was that they continued to sell their other game consoles at the same time, refusing to discontinue them for their hot new system. To put this into perspective, here's a spread page from the 1988 Sears Christmas catalog, advertising the XEGS right alongside the 7800 and the 2600 Junior. It's pretty easy to see that rather than earning new fans, Atari was really just segmenting their already existing market share. While Atari had to worry about how and where each of these systems would be displayed in retail stores and how to avoid consumers getting confused. This means that Atari was pushing retail stores to carry the 2600, 7800, XEGS, 65E, 130E, and the Atari ST all at the same time. That was an impossible request. Stores didn't have the shelf space to sell all of them. Most stores would pick one or two devices from the list to sell and would place them in radically different areas of the store, adding to consumer confusion. I've heard a lot of different takes on the XEGS. Some people have claimed it to be a pretty big failure, while others have claimed it to be a pretty big success. So which is correct? Well, after spending far too much time researching that exact question, I have to say, both? First, let's go over the case that the XEGS was successful. The most important fact for this argument is that Atari sold the XEGS at a profit. You see, many companies will sell consoles at a loss, losing money on each system sale in order to get them in more people's homes, and then hopefully make that money back in software sales. A great example of this would be Sony's PlayStation 3, which at launch sold for several $100s less than what it cost Sony to actually make the PS3. However, some companies will choose to design a lower cost system that from launch sells for more than what it costs to produce. Microsoft went down that route with the Xbox 360. This is what Atari would do with the XEGS. Since it was based on hardware that in some variant or another Atari had been selling since 1979, cost of production was cheap. Very cheap. Even at the GS's starting price of $159.99, Atari was making a great profit on each system sold. That means that the GS would be a success regardless of how many systems actually sold. It was an extreme low-risk strategy. The easy profits Atari made off of this system for the 5 years it was on the market would be a godsend for Atari, as they really struggled with having money on hand in the 90s due to declining sales and serious R&D costs for upcoming systems like the Atari Falcon and their final game console, the Atari Jaguar. Now for how the XEGS was a failure. Well, it failed in its primary goal: beat Nintendo. In 1987, Nintendo had a stranglehold on the video game market in North America. Atari had tried to break Nintendo's monopoly with the release of the 7800 in 1986, and that had already proven to not be the success Atari had been hoping for, despite spending a boatload of cash on marketing. Atari hoped that the XEGS would fare better thanks to its inclusion of game console-esque features like having a light gun, while having the unique selling point of also being a full computer. Let's see, how did that play out? The NES sold 62 million units, with 24 million of those in the United States alone, and the XEGS sold, well, that's actually hard to say. Atari had always been very secretive of their sales numbers. Accurate numbers are hard to place. We know they sold 100,000 units in 1987, which was the system's best year by far. I would place the overall sales of the XE over the 5 years it was on sale somewhere between 200K and 300K. Regardless of the actual number, that's a drop in the bucket compared to the NES. Software was interesting on the XEGS. Since it was 100% compatible with the other members of the Atari 8-bit family, games for it were simply repackaged into new blue XEGS boxes. Around 30 games were given the blue box treatment from a variety of publishers like the Softworks Factory, Broderbund, and Lucasfilm Games. Some games didn't even go that far and just had stickers slapped on the original boxes saying something along the lines of also compatible with the XE Game System. Our XEGS was purchased on eBay for $165, coming with the system, keyboard, joystick, light gun, and manuals. Basically, we got everything except the outer box. On the top of our system, you'll see the interesting colored buttons and the angled cartridge slot. It's a very unique look. On the left side is the rather awkwardly angled keyboard port, which matches the equally awkward joystick ports on the right side. On the back is the power connector, SIO bus connector, RF out, channel selector, composite video out, and audio out. On the keyboard, you can see this giant help button, which I find hilarious for some reason. Alright, now that we've talked about the history of the system, let's give it some ratings. First up is rarity. Rarity gets a 4 out of 5. Atari obviously didn't sell too many of these systems, making it one of the rarest consoles they ever made. Well, at least of those that actually left the prototype stage. Price gets a 3 out of 5. The XEGS remains fairly inexpensive despite its rarity, largely due to the lack of demand. However, in recent times the price has seemed to increase somewhat. Aesthetics? Depending on who you ask, the unique look of the XEGS makes it either the ugliest computer of all time or one of the coolest. I'm personally not really sure how I feel about it. To be on the safe side, I'm going to give it both a 1 out of 5 and a 5 out of 5. Games. Games get a 4 out of 5. Since the XEGS is fully compatible with the Atari 8-bit line, you have well over a decade worth of games to play, not counting modern homebrew applications. Convenience gets a 3 out of 5. It's real nice that it includes composite output out of the box, but it doesn't offer anything better than that without mods. It's also worth noting that just like the NES Zapper, the light gun won't work with any modern displays. Stick to using it on a CRT. Well, thanks for watching this video about the Atari XEGS. If you would please make sure to subscribe and leave us a comment down below what your favorite game on the Atari 8-bit platform is. And if you wouldn't mind, you can join our Discord server. And if you really want to see us cover way more video game consoles, we've got tons in store for you guys. Please make sure to support us on Patreon. Do it! Do it!